All right, so now we've got to fit this drawing, which is this L-shaped block. The measurements are just the measurements. The actual shape is right here in the center, horizontally and vertically, of this drawing space, which does not include the title block. So here's directions on how to do that, and we're going to go through that together. All right, so what you've got to do in number one, it says measure the distance between the top border line, which is there, and the title block line, which is this. Remember, we're not counting this anymore, just from here to here. So if we measure that, we got 7 inches, all right? That's called the vertical drawing space. So we're gonna write that measurement down on a scrap sheet of paper. So vertically, we got 7 inches of drawing space, okay? That's how much room we have to draw in. Now, in number 3, we're gonna measure the overall height of the object to be drawn. So if you look at it, the overall object is from the very, very top to the very, very bottom. If you look, it's 4.5 inches. That's how tall it is from the top to the bottom. It's 4.5. All right, so we know that. So in number 4, we got to subtract that overall height of the object from the vertical drawing space. So we got to come down here and subtract 4.5 inches from 7. So this is where people start running into problems sometimes. So what we need to do is you need to be able to do this in your head without calculators. So here's what you could do, or on paper. So instead of 7, we can change this to 6 and 2/2, which is the same thing as 7. Now we can subtract. So we subtract 6 minus 4, you get 2. 2/2 minus 1/2 is 1/2, okay? So now, what that means that we have that much drawing space that we're not gonna use, okay? So we got that number on a scrap sheet of paper. So right here, that is extra space. So that's extra drawing space. So if you think about it, the drawing takes up 4.5 inches of this 7. We're gonna have 2.5 left over. So what we gotta do to center it is divide this number by 2. So we gotta divide it in half, okay? That'll get us the centering measurements, okay? So to do that, we're gonna divide 2 in half. Half of 2 is 1. Half of 1/2. So what we've gotta do there, remember the rule. To divide any fraction in half, you keep the top number, which is the numerator, and just double the denominator. So you multiply 2 times 2, you get 4. So that's half of 2.5 is 1 inch and 1/4, okay? So that's the measurement we need to look at. So that's number 6. And number 7, we're gonna measure down that distance from what we just did in number 6, so it's 1 inch and 1/4. We're gonna measure down that distance from the top border line and lay it out on the left border line. So I'm gonna do this with my 9H pencil. So I'm gonna measure down from this top corner right here, 1 inch and 1/4, and lay it out. And that's number 7. In number 8, I'm gonna measure up that same distance from the title block line and lay it out on this left border line. So I'm gonna flip my architect scale around and I'm gonna go from right here. Remember, we don't go from right here anymore. Drawing space starts right there. 0 lines up there, come up 1 inch and 1/4 and lay it out. And if you think about it, the distance in between these 2 marks should be the height of the object. So it should be 4.5. And it is, okay? Now, double check that. Always double check to make sure you've got the height of the object, the overall height in between those 2 marks. And number 9, we're gonna draw a light horizontal construction line at those 2 layout points from the left border line to the right border line. So now I'm gonna pick up my T-square. I'm gonna start with the top one first. Light, light, light. From borderline to borderline, there. And then from borderline to borderline here. And don't worry about overrunning them. They should be so light that it doesn't matter. So now we know our drawing is gonna fit in between that top line and this bottom line. So this space don't count and this space don't count. We're not gonna measure anything in those 2 spaces anymore. In between these 2 lines is where our measurements are now. Now, in number 10, what we've got to do is the same thing horizontally. We got it centered up vertically. Now we got to center it up horizontally. So we're gonna measure the distance between the left borderline and the right borderline. All right, that's called the horizontal drawing space. So do that on a line. You can use title block line, that bottom line you just drew. It's all the same distance, so I'm gonna put my 0 there, and if you look, we've got 11 inches, which is what you should have. So now we're gonna center it up horizontally. So we're gonna write that down. We got 11 inches of drawing space. All right, so number 12, we gotta measure the overall length of the object to be drawn. So that's from the very left to the very right. So if you look at it, it's 4 inches right there, all right? So we got that. And number 13, we're gonna subtract that overall length of the object from that horizontal drawing space. So we gotta subtract 4 inches from 11. That gives you 7 inches. That's how much extra drawing space. So that's the extra drawing space that we're not gonna use. We got that much left over. All right, and we got that wrote down. So number 15, just like we did with the other drawing space, we gotta divide that number by 2 to get it centered up. So half of 7 is 3.5. All right, that's our magic number, okay? So now what you're gonna do is measuring that distance from the left borderline and use this bottom construction line to do your measurements on. So we're gonna measure in 3.5 inches on that bottom construction line where we started centering it up vertically. So 3.5. Place a light layout mark there. All right. And then in 17, we're gonna measure in that distance from the right borderline and on that bottom construction line. So I gotta flip this over. One common mistake is people will just come over another 3.5. That's not what you do. This has to come around and you gotta come back in from the right. I come in from the left, I gotta come in from the right. So we'll put it right there. Got 0 on my right borderline and I'm on that bottom construction line. I'm gonna come over 3.5 inches. Make me a layout mark there. And if you've done it correctly, the distance in between those two marks should be the length of the object, which is 4. So we're gonna measure that. And it is. All right, number 18, you're gonna draw light vertical construction lines at those points from the bottom construction line to the top construction line. So we're going to grab our triangle, put it down on our T-square. And I'm gonna start right here and draw up through that top borderline, top horizontal construction line, and then right there. Now our drawing fits right in the center. That's it for center.